don't know the power of the dark side.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Hello there.
Why, hello there. Welcome back to the Star Wars headquarters, and we are talking about episode 3 of The Bad Batch, which just premiered on Disney Plus. And let me tell you, this was a good episode. It's full of tons of suspense, action, and perhaps one of the most dark moments in Star Wars history. This was definitely a pivotal turning point for the Empire, and it also really showed how the clones react when working with regular recruited soldiers. So we're going to jump into this episode. We're going to also talk about, of course, Omega's story as well, and the Bad Batch and what's going on with them. I'm going to separate this into two parts. We're going to focus on what's happening on Kamino first, and then we're going to jump to the Bad Batch and talk about what's happening with them. So let's first start off with Crosshair here, who of course is just waking up from his scan, and Tarkin is checking up on him, asking if everything is going as planned. And Nala Se here is saying, yes, everything looks good with Crosshair. He is going to obey. And we then see Rampart come in, and Rampart and Tarkin begin talking about something called Project War Mantle. If you don't know what Project War Mantle is, it is what is transpiring before our very eyes, the recruitment of regular people into the Imperial Army and the replacement of clones with regular people. So that's what Project War Mantle is all about. And it's going according to plan, and the Kaminoans, they don't like this. They don't like the sound of Project Mantle at all, and that is definitely another focal point of this episode. Now, we see Tarkin joined with Crosshair here, who then meet up with a brand new elite Imperial squad. And at first, when I saw the Imperial squad, I immediately thought this was Iden Versio, but I don't think it is, because the age would not match up at all. At this point in the timeline, Iden Versio is way too young. I'm not sure if she's born yet. I gotta look that up, but this cannot be Iden Versio from what I understand in the timeline. But they reminded me so much of Inferno Squad. That's the first thing I thought. And she looks exactly like Iden Versio, but in animated form here. So what did you think? Did you think it was Iden Versio when you first saw her? I'm sure many of you thought that. But here we get our introduction of this elite Imperial squad. Of course, these are not clones. They've been recruited, and it's kind of awkward because Tarkin and Rampart, they actually want Crosshair to train these new recruits. So that makes it awkward, of course. And we get to witness this awkwardness between, Crosshair and these new recruits. And even at one point, one of the new recruits says something to Crosshair, like he's not going to be around much longer. And of course, that does not make Crosshair happy at all. So, a lot of drama going on here between the Imperials and between the Imperial regular recruits and the Imperial clone Crosshair, and it's not looking good because they're getting angry at each other, and there's a lot of tension here. Now, they end up going on a mission to Saul Guerrera's planet in effort to destroy Saul and his encampment. And this is also a mission set up to do what the Bad Batch failed to do originally, and Tarkin wants to see if this new elite Imperial squad, if you will, is up to the task. And at first they go in there and they're doing their job. They're wiping out the encampment. They're using freaking flamethrowers on these poor people and these poor Republic rebels, if you will. They're trying their best to fend off this attack, but it's not looking good for these rebel soldiers here. And they're just relentless. The elite Imperial soldiers, they're just relentless. They're laying down heavy firepower. They're throwing smoke bombs on them, sniping them, and doing all kinds of stuff. But where it turns really dark is when these innocent civilians basically come out of the ship, and they are surrendering. They have their hands up, and yes, she is mouthing off to the Imperial soldiers, but she has surrendered. She's thrown her weapon down, and you can guess what happens next. Crosshair literally executes the poor woman here, and it was gut-wrenching when I saw this part. I couldn't believe it. I literally gasped. This is perhaps one of the darkest moments I've seen in animated Star Wars. So they're not holding back here at all with the Bad Batch in the portrayal of the Imperial soldier. So this is showing you just how serious this is, and it's showing you the awful war crimes that the Imperial soldiers commit right off the bat. And of course, Crosshair, it appears he's still under the influence of his chip, so we have to keep that in mind. But, you know, the other Imperial soldiers, they're like, whoa, what is happening here? You know, you just executed that poor woman, and they don't want to go through with it. You know, they want to go through the proper mechanisms of handling prisoners of war. They don't want to execute these poor civilians, especially since there are also, you know, women, and I don't know if there are children there, but it is just an awful, awful thing that's happening. Now, when the Imperial troops, you know, basically tell Crosshair, we're not going to do this, Crosshair turns on his own and of course shoots one of them, as you know, and he's meaning business here. He's basically saying, if you do not follow my orders or go through with the Imperial's commands, I'm gonna kill you all. And the soldiers look at each other like they have no choice at this point. You know, Crosshair basically has a gun to their heads, and they have no choice to follow orders. Now, if it was me in this situation, I would have never followed through the orders. I would have ended up trying to fight Crosshair off, and I would have never followed orders in this case. So I still think one of them could have, you know, changed this situation and prevented the death of these innocent civilians, and completely prevented it by, you know, basically shooting Crosshair and trying to go up against him. But unfortunately, the civilians do end up getting executed by the Imperial soldiers. They do follow orders. And what's even more frightening about this is when the Imperials arrive back on Kamino, both Tarkin and Rampart, while they did notice their less one soldier, they were happy with the result. So even though they had one less soldier coming back from this mission, they were still pleased with the results and felt like these Imperial cadets did a better job than that of the Bad Batch. I was gonna say Order 66, but than that of the Bad Batch. So pretty scary stuff here to see what Rampart and Tarkin are capable of. And again, it shows you the beginning of the transition from regular clones to these new elite Imperials, and how they're utilizing a clone that is controlled by a chip apparently to influence these other Imperial soldiers. So again, it's pretty scary to see the effects of Order 66 still happening here and carrying on right through to the orders that these soldiers are forced to follow, because again, they had a gun pointed to their head. You know, so it's pretty scary what's happening here. So what do you think is going to happen next? You know, we did see one of these soldiers look hesitant. You could tell that they were thinking that this is not right. Do you think that one of these Imperial soldiers is going to form a mutiny, and go up against Crosshair? I think it's very possible to see that happen. Or maybe one of them will join Nala Se in a rebellion against Tarkin and Rampart, because I think that's happening. As you know, at the end of the episode, we saw the Kaminoans talking about moving on from previous clone projects in effort to make a superior clone. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the Kaminoans have in store for, you know, Tarkin and Rampart. I'm thinking that there's going to be a big civil war coming up here on Kamino. Let's go and talk about what's happening with the Bad Batch. We can't forget about them. Their story was very interesting. I think their story was more about Omega becoming more independent and proving herself as a efficient part of the squad, someone who could actually perform as a squad member, and someone who could also handle herself on her own, because we saw her in action on this moon planet, because as you know, they ended up crashing on this mysterious moon planet because their ship was damaged from the previous episode, and they ended up having to face off against these moon dragons that, were out there trying to take parts off their ship. We saw the claw marks and we saw all that, and one of the moon dragons ended up taking one of the capacitors off the ship, and in the process freaking out Omega. I love her expression here. It's so funny because like a horror movie, she was just freaked out by this moon dragon on the outside of the ship. So Hunter and Omega both go out there in the wilderness, if you will, to go hunt for the moon dragon. And what happens is Hunter ends up stumbling upon the moon dragon, of course, but he ends up getting his oxygen mask ripped off his face, and he ends up, of course, blacking out. And Omega decides to take it upon herself to utilize the blaster of Hunter and go out there and try to find this capacitor and take out the moon dragon herself. Of course, she didn't have to. She ends up stumbling upon the capacitor. She ends up going face to face with one of these moon dragons. It freaks her out, but she manages to keep her cool, and she ends up realizing that, these moon dragons, of course, they feed off energy. So she feeds this moon dragon her flashlight, which I found kind of funny. When it was eating the flashlight, I found that part to be a Star Wars funny moment, but it works. It's a good distraction. She manages to grab the capacitor and get out of there, and Hunter is like, whoa, who is this? This is not the Omega I'm used to. This is quite amazing that you pulled this off. And like a father to his daughter, he was super proud of her and super surprised that she was able to handle herself that well in the episode. So it was really cool to see Omega and Hunter further bonding like this, and to see, the pride of Hunter up over Omega like that. So I thought that was really cool to see. And then I could not forget about Wrecker, because I'm a little bit worried about Wrecker at the beginning of the episode. Of course, he was holding his head, and I'm guessing it has something to do with his inhibitor chip. So I'm a little bit worried that something is going on with Wrecker, and I'm worried that he might start either losing his mind or becoming unstable as we get into further episodes. So we'll see what happens with that. But at the ending, it was a really sweet moment between Wrecker and Omega. He gave her a surprise, which was her very own room on their ship, which was really cool to see. And Omega was completely caught off guard by this. It was a really sweet moment, and she absolutely loved the gift from Wrecker. And I really loved how Wrecker wanted to give her this gift, because as you know, at the beginning of the episode, he really wasn't tuning in to all the stuff that Omega has gone through. And this just shows that Wrecker is becoming more thoughtful of Omega and really showing, that he does really care. So I really love this part. And it really means so much to Omega, of course, because she has never ever had her own room. So this was the perfect gift for Omega, and I just love this part. It just made me have the feels, and I'm really loving the whole development of Omega's character and the bond between the Bad Batch and Omega. So leave your comments in the comments down below. What was your favorite part of this episode? There's so many good parts in this episode. I absolutely loved it, and I think this series as a whole right now is heading in the right direction, and I am loving this series so far. I cannot wait for episode 4. So stay tuned for episode 4, which is coming up in a week from this video, and I'll be doing a full breakdown and review of that episode as well. And hopefully I didn't miss anything in my breakdown. There's tons of stuff to go over. I'm sure I missed something. So if I did, leave a comment down below. Let me know. But that's going to do it for the video. I will see you all next time. Take care, and may the Force be with you always.